Statement by Anand Ramlogan SC. Hang your heads in shame. This is a historic and landmark judgment that signals a major development in our constitutional jurisprudence as it relates to the right to liberty and freedom of movement. It is also a stinging indictment on the way the PNM administration managed the reopening of our borders during the COVID-19 pandemic. When the government decided to allow citizens who were stranded overseas to re-enter the country, Minister Young refused to publish the factors or criteria that would be taken into account in deciding who would be allowed to re-entry and when. The court has quite rightly described this as the epitome of arbitrariness because it meant distressed and aggrieved citizens were essentially shooting in the dark. In the meantime, however, the privileged 1%, political financiers, friends, and supporters were being granted privileged access to information that was kept a secret. Whilst the rich were being allowed to return home, hundreds of our poor and vulnerable citizens who were simply told to shelter in place were simply left grieving and distressed in the dark. The cruel irony is that many of the persons were rendered homeless and barely able to survive, but whilst their pleas were callously ignored, those with privileged access to the government were able to return home. Miss Joanne Panthen's video begging Prime Minister Rowley to show some compassion had hit a raw nerve in society. The sight of her traumatized and disoriented face, begging to come home, has left an indelible mark on the nation's conscience. Lorik was seeking medical treatment, and Panthen was visiting her sick son-in-law and grandchildren who were on holiday in the USA when the borders were suddenly closed. They were both stranded, and as their funds ran out, were rendered homeless and destitute. This judgment clears the way for other citizens who were similarly circumstanced to sue for the breach of their constitutional rights. The unfair and discriminatory manner in which the government managed the reopening of our borders is a stain on our democracy. Stuart Young was, in effect, playing God by secretly deciding who could return home and who could not. Many citizens died grieving to return home, poor, homeless, and heartbroken. The government was guilty of favoring some whilst ignoring the cries and tears of others, favoring those who could have afforded to remain outside, whilst cruelly ignoring the tears and cries of those who could not. This was an assault and affront to the rule of law. The secretive and mysterious manner in which the government managed the process of re-entry meant that it could literally pick and choose who it wanted to help without any form of transparency and accountability. Those responsible for the human disaster should hang their heads in shame and disgrace.